He was a morbidly obese surgeon destined for an operating table and an early death. Now he's a rebel MD who is fabulously fit and fighting to make America healthy again. This is Stay Off My Operating Table with Dr. Philip Ovadia.
Welcome back, folks. It's the Stay Off My Operating Table podcast. We are joined today by the only man who's ever been on the show who has a voice even better than mine.
No. Jack, I've met you in person, man, and the mic doesn't do you justice, my friend.
He's sucking up to us, folks. Phil, introduce this loony bird to us all.
Yeah, this is a reintroduction. Very happy to have a good friend of the pod, Charles Mayfield, back, the Lard father, as we know him. And for those of you that want to go back into the archives, we had Charles on quite a while ago, and a lot of amazing things that he's done, that he's continuing to do. And we had the good fortune, actually, the three of us, of being together in person just recently at Hack Your Health conference. And at that conference, Charles delivered what I thought was a killer talk. And I basically said, we gotta get this out to the audience. We got to get you back on to talk about it. We'll certainly get to that, but maybe for those of you that didn't listen to the first episode, Charles, why don't you give a little bit of your background and how you got to be known as the Lard father?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Phil. It's great to be here. Am I the first repeat guest on the Stay Off My Opera?
No,
Okay.
We've had so many, at least two.
Just trying to build my resume a little bit, you know. It's a pleasure to be here. My background is a sordid history of a number of different curiosities and adventures, but I would say all very centric to health and wellness. And yeah, I would say the person you see before you today got into CrossFit in the mid 2000s. CrossFit led me to paleo. I've co-authored a number of cookbooks in the paleo space. And once I got really interested in food, the next step on the ladder was really where does my food come from? Had the fortunate opportunity to be asked to cook and raise money for the Farm to Consumer Legal Defense Fund at Polyface Farms in Virginia. This is back probably 2014. And grew up in a sort of a agriculturally adjacent family. My family was in the dairy business, although in my formidable years, the family business had grown to really be a milk bottler. So we weren't milking cows anymore. We were pasteurizing milk and sticking it in a bottle. So I would say my farming curiosity really peaked on that trip to Polyface, and just read a bunch and got super curious. And, you know, at some point there's no more books to read. It's time to do that. And so 2016, I launched Mayfield Pastures, which was a very small, hyper niche regenerative farm, leased some land on a family farm, and was raising pork, beef, chicken, doing some eggs, batch of turkeys every year. And had a small clientele, probably 50 to 60 customers spread out locally and all the way down to Atlanta, where I'd spent many years. And had been in the gym space, CrossFit again, health, wellness, the cookbooks. And so I've been coaching people for many years on how to eat right. I called it at some point my paleo lens. You know, if you can't pronounce it, you shouldn't eat it. Read the ingredients. And fast forward, it was 2019. I had a fairly epic sunburn. Most listeners can relate to, you know, one of those highly memorable barbecuings. And, you know, out of a half desperation, half curiosity, I came home. I had a jar of lard from the pigs we were raising in my refrigerator and decided we call it lathering up. I just, you know, coated my skin with this stuff. And, you know, in a matter of minutes, I had, you know, almost immediate relief, put a little bit more on the next morning, 2 applications. And, you know, wouldn't you know it, my sunburn was more or less resolved in about 2 days, which was great. Phil, you know this, you know, when you tinker in the health nutrition space, when you change something or notice something, your senses are heightened. And after it went away, I really watched my skin like a hawk for about 2 or 3 weeks. And I never peeled, like not one stitch of skin peeled. And that was really the watershed moment for me that got me. It just blew my mind because, and everybody that's ever had a bad sunburn, at some point you peel. Doesn't matter how much aloe vera you put on or any of that stuff. At some point it's coming off. And so that really started piquing my curiosity. I took that paleo lens and shined it on skincare. And wouldn't you know it, there's just as much toxicity in skincare, as maybe even more so than there is in the food industry. I don't know. Today, the ultra processed foods are pretty gnarly, but yeah, that was it. And so I started tinkering around in the kitchen, making batches of samples, and I'd take them to my farming customers. And, lo and behold, they really liked it. I loved it. And so, yeah, we launched Farrow in January of 2022. And so we're coming into our third year of business now. And the thing that's been the most surprising to me over those 2 or 3 years, being a guy trying to convince folks to smear lard on their skin, is how many people just had no idea what lard was. Tallow is, the animal skincare industry, albeit small, is dominated by tallow. And we love tallow. We use it in our products. But there was this real disconnect, and it sort of shocked me. I grew up in the South. I remember Crisco and I remember lard for sure. But, this was part of the talk in Austin, Phil. If you rewind the clock 100 years ago, but if you go back to 1910 and you walked in the general store, there were no grocery stores in 1910. You walk in the general store to buy your nails and your shoe polish and your flour and your sugar. There is a 100% chance that you walked out of that store with a can of lard. And this is pre-refrigeration. This is air conditioning. I don't want to go back to those times. I'm really happy with the AC, but fast forward, 100 and some odd, two retirees later, and no one knows about lard. And so that's really the mission of Farrow, is to bring the power of the lard to the masses and to educate people about just how miraculous the pig is. And so, yeah, that's a little bit of my background, maybe a little long-winded, but here we are.
Yeah, no, I think that's leads us naturally into some of the things you discussed in your talk. And I think some of the things that I want our audience to hear. Maybe let's just start with the basics, because you mentioned it. You asked today, and most people can't even tell you what lard is. So what is lard?
Great question. So lard is the rendered subcutaneous fat from a pig. It's not directly adjacent to tallow, and we'll talk about 3 fats. So lard is the rendered subcutaneous fat from a pig. The public never sees the subcutaneous fat from beef because it's usually used in the grind of ground beef. And of course, cows are a ruminant animal. It's a little harder for them to pack on subcutaneous fat, but tallow has a pig equivalent as well. That's called leaf lard.
Oh,
So that's the rendered visceral fat from a pig. If you hear the term lard, it is specific to a pig. If you hear the term tallow, that is a sort of a placeholder term for any visceral fat rendered from a ruminant herbivore. So cow, most commonly the cow, but elk, beef, bison, deer, the list goes on and on.
Now, we know, certainly in humans, some of the difference between the visceral and subcutaneous fat. Talk about that maybe from a pig perspective, what some of those differences are. And just to kind of reiterate what you said, there's actually kind of 2 types of lard. There's what's commonly called lard, the subcutaneous fat, and there's the leaf lard, which is specific to the visceral fat.
Yeah, I can talk about that. Both fats perform a different duty. Okay, so the visceral fat, the kidney fat, that's probably a better placeholder term for it. Kidney fat, biologically by design, is a padding or a protector. It's like the seat belt for the organs. And with humans, it's the same thing. We bump into things, and every now and then have to get into a tussle. And so when the body is jarred, if you will, it acts as a padding. But more importantly, there's no biological function to store. So the visceral fat it's there. Now it can grow, it can get bigger or smaller. If you've ever had a DEXA scan, you certainly know that visceral fat can build. However, it's a it's a continuous organ. So if you pull out the leaf lard from a pig, it is encased in a skin. So it's literally like one big organ. That's not the case with the subcutaneous fat. It grows and builds on a cellular level. And so pigs, just like humans, are incredibly efficient at converting excess calories. Certainly, once they've framed out and matured, just like a human, they're very, very good at converting excess calories into subcutaneous fat. And if you put a pig next to a cow, I know they're the different sizes, but as a ratio of meat to fat, you're going to see a much higher amount of fat on a pig than you will a cow. And the subcutaneous fat, the source of lard, that is a biological storage mechanism. So pigs are going to metabolize vitamin D from the sun the same way we do. They're going to store any excess vitamin D in their fat stores, minerals, various things. Those all get packed into the subcutaneous fat. And also environmentally. So if you've heard the term like acorn finished, the Spanish are infamous for this. These acorn finished Spanish serranos and cured hams. A pig will take its environment. If you feed a pig peaches for 2 months before it has its one bad day, goes off to the butcher, there will be a sweetness. If you feed them acorns, there will be a nuttiness to the subcutaneous fat because they're taking that environmental exposure, both dietarily and environmentally, and they're storing it. And I say the swine is divine, but the lard is hard. For that lard to be of quality, that pig really needs to have lived a very good, healthy, vibrant, fed life outdoors.
Yeah. And what are some of the maybe unique properties of lard comparing it to tallow? We don't even need to talk about all the artificial kind of fats, all the non-mammalian fats that, typically are in skincare products. But if we're just looking at the, animal fats, maybe talk about some of the differences in lard versus tallow that may have advantages when it comes to using it on our skin.
Sure. I mean, tallow at room temperature is very solid. I'm sure if your listeners have had a tallow bomb or even a whipped tallow, it's hard at room temperature. And so you got to really dig in there. Lard is a little bit more liquid. I think that has to do primarily with the variation in saturated fats, unsaturated fats, monosaturated fats. Lard, if you look at the lipid balance, if you look at the pH, if you look at the various naturally occurring vitamins and minerals that are stored in fat, lard is a spot-on match to human biology. We love tallow, and I agree we don't need to talk about all the other garbage that's out there. We put tallow in our products, but we share more biology with a pig than we do a cow on many fronts. And, I get asked this all the time. Well, why do you put tallow in your products? Tallow doesn't absorb as well. It's less recognizable by your skin than lard. It's way more recognizable than, say, cottonseed oil or, any of these petroleum derivatives for sure. But it will sit on the skin surface a little bit more. And so we use it for two reasons. One, it allows me to create the viscosity, if you will, of a more traditional, it's not the right way, industrial cream. So you go to the CVS or your pharmacy and you buy a cream off the shelf, it's creamy. Tallow's not creamy. Lard's a little bit liquidy at room temperature. And so I use it almost as an emulsifying agent to make the cream a little smoother. And then secondarily, once you've applied our product, the lard is going to preferentially be consumed by your skin, and the tallow really acts. It's going to stay on the surface a little bit, and it really acts as a barrier. So you moisturize the skin and you sort of seal it in, and the results have been, absolutely amazing.
And, just kind of, I think finishing off the sort of composition of these products, another question that always comes to people's minds is, all the other stuff that's put into typical skincare products. And, maybe we specifically look at things like fragrances, and people might be thinking, I don't want to walk around smelling like bacon all day. So talk about
Sure.
that and why, your products really don't have much else in them.
Yeah, so there's two renderings. So you take fat and you render the fat. And there are two predominant rendering methods. There's a dry rendering and a wet rendering. And all consumers are familiar with the dry rendering method. It's heat only. If you've ever cooked bacon, then you are rendering fat. You're also cooking meat simultaneously. And so most consumers associate, when they hear the term lard, because they don't really know what it is, they associate it with bacon grease. And bacon grease is rendered pig fat, but it's also, you've cooked some things. And so we utilize a wet rendering method. There's a little water, and it's really mostly fat when we render. Again, cooking bacon, you look at the strip of bacon, it's half meat, half fat. And so, I mean, leaf lard was prized as a baking fat still is to this day, but not many people know about it. It was prized as a baking fat forever because, again, subcutaneous fat is storage, visceral fat is not. And so it didn't matter what the pig ate. The visceral fat was odorless and colorless. And so when you're baking your pie crust or your biscuits or your cake, it wouldn't impart a flavor or smell. Does lard have a flavor or smell? Yes, it's ever so slight. Our unscented products, people are actually kind of shocked when they smell them because there's not really much there. And I said before, we use tallow in our products. I would argue that tallow, as a general in a general sense, it has more odor to it, again, albeit slight, has more odor to it than lard does.
All right. A number of things. I guess the big thing for me is you gave a speech at Hack Your Health that I managed to miss. And it was so good that Phil said, we need to have Charles back on the show. And I argued with him. I said, no, God, no, we don't need to hear that man talk anymore. But Phil insisted, and it's his show.
That hurts a little, Jack.
But also, as we were talking there, the Farrow Life booth was right across from Phil's booth. You've got some products I hadn't seen before. So I'd just like to throw it to you. Pick one. Tell us about these new products, what they're doing, why you developed them, or I'd kind of be interested to hear what impressed Phil so much about your speech.
If I could pick one product to highlight, I would say it would be our unscented skin food. I think our unscented face food is our more popular seller. It's a little slightly lower price point, so that may be just economics talking. But our unscented skin food, so it's the product I use most. I tell people I travel with our face food, and when I'm home, it's the skin food because it's a smaller package. But, the unscented product's got 4 ingredients: lard, leaf lard, tallow, and honey. We use a little bit of honey. It's very good for the skin. Yep. And I like it too because it's a raw honey, so it's got a little bit of waxy feel to it. So when I'm done lathering up, it leaves a little bit of a tack on my hands. It's 4 ingredients. I challenge you to walk into any pharmacy in the country and find a skincare product that's got 4 ingredients, certainly any that have animal fat in them, because that does not exist. And we're an animal, folks. Just to remind you, we're not a coconut. We're not a petroleum derivative. And yeah, so that would be the product I would most showcase in terms of it. You can use it anywhere. I mean, I use it on my face. It's a bigger product, so your price per ounce of lard is substantially better if you're looking for a deal. And it's the cleanest thing we got. We offer it in a scented version as well. We scent our products with all natural organic essential oils. But I have found, I never would have thought this, but I have found over time that most of our consumers and customers tend to gravitate towards the unscented products. They're just cleaner. They're very grounding in terms of once you apply them. But I like our scented stuff too. Jack, in terms of the talk, I can hit some highlight points. Evidence shows that we domesticated pigs in what is now the Middle East. It was called the Far East back then, as far ago as about 13,500 years ago. So arguably, they're the first animal we domesticated for meat. We have a much longer track record with dogs, but that wasn't to eat. That was to co-hunt with. And so arguably the first animal we domesticated for meat. History is just wrought. And I didn't even dig into the Asian history with pigs. There's a record of them domesticating pigs there in about 8,500 years ago. But yeah, so we have a long history with pigs. And if you go back through the literature, I'll give one example. Galen, who was Marcus Aurelius's concierge doctor, if you will, in the early hundreds. He's the founding father of anatomy, physiology. I want to say two other, I can't remember. I don't have my notes in front of me, but this guy was a major player and arguably the most important doctor to Marcus Aurelius, and credits most of his knowledge to his ability to understand the anatomy of pigs through dissection and raising them and just understanding how they functioned. And so that's just a snippet. And then, I got into more modern history and how the pig is built. Pigs are built to dig and root. They're also built with they have very small lungs for their size, so they're especially prone to respiratory illnesses given their size. And if you look at how we raise pigs today, 98+% of the pigs in this country are raised indoors. They never see the sun, tight quarters, poor air quality. And so it's really an environment for just candidly suffering. And don't people know about lard? I talked about this a little bit. So Crisco comes along in 1911. Crisco, for your listeners that don't know, is a cottonseed derivative product that they have to bleach white to look like lard, by the way. They bleach white, and there's the chemical process to hydrogenate and create that stuff is pretty gnarly as well. But it hits the market in 1911. The nail that really finished off the coffin of lard came in World War II. And this is fascinating, but we rationed lard in World War II. Did you know that, Jack?
We rationed lard?
A couple things happened.
Why?
Because you can't make nitroglycerin out of cottonseed oil.
I'm sorry, but I'm not seeing the connection, but go ahead.
The war effort, in order to make explosives, you need nitroglycerin. You can't make nitroglycerin.
Had lard to make
lard is the ideal. You remember Fight Club?
Oh, yeah.
Here you go.
Oh boy.
They're raiding the dumpsters outside the liposuction clinics because the next best thing to pig. I joke about this. I'm like, if Brad Pitt and Ed Norton just knew a pig farmer, they wouldn't have to go raiding those dumpsters. But the reality is, you can't make. It's the most efficacious fat to make nitroglycerin, which is explosives. Now, fast forward to today, all of our explosives are synthetic.
Right.
But that was the nail that really drove home. Put lard off the shelf because you couldn't get it. Here's this Crisco stuff. And, there's the lipid hypothesis and Ansel Keys, and there's all these other contributing factors. But lard was the first animal fat to be targeted and picked on, if you will, by the industrial seed oil business. Tallow, interestingly enough, so tallow, McDonald's used to cook with tallow.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
Back when their French fries tasted good.
You want to know why?
I assumed it was because they were fried in tallow.
Because it was cheap. Oh. So the beef industry could not grow until we mastered refrigeration, right? You did not kill a cow in July 100 years ago. Because what are you going to do with this 1,500-pound carcass? First of all, you got to move it around. You got to skin it and eviscerate it and all those fun things. But then what are you going to do with it? You got to keep it cold so that it doesn't spoil. And so once we, especially post-World War II, once we mastered refrigeration and mechanization and all of these things, it opened up the market for a broader expansion of the beef industry. We kill a lot of beef in this country. We have for a long time. And by now, we didn't cook with tallow 100 years ago. It was lard. Tallow was reserved for soap and candle making. Okay. And so now all of a sudden you got all this tallow laying around. It was cheap. And so McDonald's is looking around, what am I going to fry my fries in? Here's this waste product from the beef industry. I'll bet I can get it pretty cheap.
Oh.
How about that?
This is why we invite this guy on here. He's got this stuff that nobody else knows about. This is fantastic.
Oh yeah, and the talk was certainly chock full of that, but it really made me, it kind of starts to bring a lot of these pieces of the story together as to, you can see the whole narrative building, the whole narrative building to villainize these natural products in so that the synthetic products, the industrial products, can take hold and be promoted. I guess we'll shift a little bit just to kind of broaden this out to the skincare industry and some of the things that, are going on in there, some of the shenanigans I would point to that may be harming our health in the same way that, we've talked a lot about what has gone on in the food industry and how that has harmed our health. But I think people may not recognize the impact of what you're putting on your skin on your health. I think many people have this concept that, you put something on your skin, it kind of stays on your skin, you shower it off or whatever, and, it's not going to impact your health. So talk about why that might not be true and why people should be concerned and should start paying attention to what's in what they're putting on their skin.
Yeah, sure. So the primary consumer protection legal structure for skincare and cosmetics was established in 1938. It's called the Food and Cosmetics Act. At the time, again, you got to think 1938. At the time, the ingredients in skincare that required pre-market safety testing were color additives. That was it. And of course, again, 1938, we haven't perfected all of this industrial, chemical harvesting and synthesizing. That act has been updated twice since then as it relates to as it relates to the act. I know of two, it might be three. I can't keep up with the politics, but cosmetics has been excluded from every single update, right? So the consumer protection laws in place around skincare are coming up on 100 years old. And what's more concerning, again, is what we've been able to generate in terms of chemicals, parabens, phthalates, oxybenzones, and all these various components. And, just to brush over it real quick, your skin is your largest organ. It does eat things. If you've ever brushed up against a poison ivy bush, you know perfectly well that it likes to eat oils. And it's also developed some really smart mechanisms. Think through the evolutionary lens, right? It's developed some pretty good mechanisms for protecting itself. The problem is most of the chemicals, skincare, if you go into the pharmacy and you buy a product, it's an emulsified product. So you take fat, you take water, you get an emulsifier and you mix them together. When you do that, you're creating an environment that is highly conducive for bacterial growth. The water acts as a fuel source, as food for bacteria. In doing that, you have to inject quite a number of various preservatives and chemicals. And then you got to monkey with the pH because skincare, it's a fat-based game, but it's also a pH-based game. You don't want it to be too acidic or too basic. So you end up with this chemical, soup, if you will. And we know very clearly today that a lot of these compounds are endocrine disrupting, and that's not good. A lot of them are estrogen signaling. It's not that estrogen's not important, but we don't want to monkey with it with our skincare. And, the real message, I'm trying to, talk about a couple different things. Obviously, the power of the pig and lard, not only from a culinary standpoint, but also through the lens of skincare, but also the current state of affairs in skincare. I think we're slowly turning the corner, just like with your practice, Phil. And I have to say, this is completely sideways, but, your carnivore panel on Friday, not one question about cholesterol, right? And so we were talking about that after you're talking. I'm like, man, we're turning a corner, right? The tide is shifting. And, I think it's going to ultimately be the nutrition side of the house that drags people into seeing that same thing through the lens of skincare, which is great. And there's some great products out there, again, albeit mostly tallow-based. We're the Lard game in town. But yeah, the consumer protections that are in place are not helping anyone. If you go to the American Academy of Dermatology, go to their website, they have 27 corporate sponsors. They're all pharmaceutical companies.
Just say that again. Just say that again.
Yeah. So to get your accreditation as a dermatologist, you join the American Academy of Dermatology, which ironically started in 1938, the same year that the Food and Cosmetics Act was passed, right? And it's right there on their website. Here are our gold level, silver level, platinum level sponsors, 27 of them, all of them. Actually, all but one are big pharma. One of them is a lab testing type companies. So skin testing and this, that, and the other, but all pharma adjacent. And, it's the same situation in the dermatology esthetician world, Phil, that you see in the medical world. All the major medical schools are funded by big pharma. And we have a real problem. The fox is guarding the hen house, if you will. And, my job is to talk about it, but also provide a product that's clean, highly efficacious, and also talk about it and help people understand that these animals, I talked about this a little bit in the talk, pigs are actually modern day medical heroes, right? I talked about you in my talk, Phil. We use their heart valves to repair pigs. We harvest over 20 different hormones from pigs and use them in humans. I mean, it's just the biology is so tight, and so treat this modern day medical hero so poorly, to raise them in such an awful environment is just, it's beyond reprehensible. And, crazy enough, if you raise them in the right way, their meat is better, their fat is better. I'm going to imagine their hormones and everything else are probably healthier as well. So there you go.
Yeah, and just to really hammer that point home about how, most people would think that the closest animal to us is going to be, in the monkey ape family, but it really is the pig. And, when we look at the potential of transplanting organs from other animals to humans, pig organs are the focus. Pig organs are the only ones, to my knowledge, that have actually made it to human clinical use and are currently being trialed to transplant parts from pigs and kidneys and other organs from pigs. It really does hammer home that point. And, just to kind of circle back again and crystallize, there's really only 3 ways that the outside environment gets into our body. And that's either through our intestines when we eat it, through our lungs when we breathe it in, and through our skin, when we absorb things through the skin and apply things to the skin. We have to really start thinking about what we're putting on our skin and how that's going to impact our health, because it's not a barrier. It's an exchange membrane, as we call it, really, because we can put things out too. We can sweat things out and things like that. What, you've been now kind of in this for a number of years. What has most surprised you about the skincare industry?
The industry, I don't know if it's a surprise so much as just an observation. It's a lot like the bottled water industry. It's all marketing. Whether you pay, $3 for the bottle of water in glass or you pay 99 cents, it's at the end of the day, it's the same product inside. And, if you go to, again, you go to the pharmacy, you go to your, it doesn't matter the product or the packaging. There's 90% correlation in terms of the ingredients underneath the lid. And my product is the same. I use the same 3 or 4 or 5 ingredients in all my products too. But the point is, those products, here's a good point. Those products, I did find this out. They're not safety tested. They're don't harm tested. Right. So it's just like when a pharmaceutical company wants to bring a new drug to trial, right? They do all their own testing and then they submit the data that they want to the FDA for approval. Well, a skincare product works the same way. They will develop the product, they will test it, but they're not testing it for efficacy. They're testing it to make sure it doesn't harm you. And those are 2 different modus operandi, if you will.
Yeah.
Let's see how well this works is different than let's make sure this doesn't hurt the consumer. And so that's probably been, again, I've started looking around and I read labels now, and it's just, it's the same light bulb moment I had when I started reading food labels. It's, oh my gosh, look what they put in here. Why is this even here? And so you start looking at skincare labels, and it is exactly the same thing. I'll add one surprise. This may freak your listener out a little bit, but I have to give credit to, oh gosh, what's his name? It'll come to me. We hyper sanitize. Now, in an environment, in a clinical or surgical environment like you get into from time to time, Phil, that is immeasurably important. However, And this got exacerbated, obviously, in the last 3 or 4 years with the over-sanitization of our environment. But, your skin, I mean, we used to take a bath once a week. And I mean, this is recent history. We would bathe very infrequently. But the soaps, it's skincare covers soaps, cosmetics, a number of shampoos, conditioners, and the toxicity there is just as harsh. And I would say that the consumer over sanitizes. I take a shower every day. I will soap. I'll actually, I mean, I wash and washcloth, but this is a surprise to me. My skin has never felt or performed as well as it does now. And I probably only wash with soap 3 times, 4 times a month, tops. Shower every time, wash off every time. I never stink. I can tell this is the kind of thing you tell somebody at the end of the night, not the beginning. But that was a real shocker for me, is because I had grown up, you take a shower every day,
Right.
you cover up. And, just like any change, it took about a week or two of reacclimating, right? Because your body loves homeostasis. And so your glands, these glands in your skin that produce sebum, our natural oil, they're sort of programmed to keep you with every day or twice a day, or in some cases, crazy enough, 3 times a day. If you're stripping those natural oils off your skin, you're sending signals to your body, produce more oil. And so you get into these oily skin or acne type situations because you're manufacturing more of this stuff than you need to be.
So that begs the question, at least in my mind, I got to set it up to try to make sure I'm asking it right. So by using these soaps that are made out of God knows what, with all kinds of chemicals and stuff in them on our skin, stripping away the natural oils in our skin, and then coming back and trying to do something to replace the natural oils. It sounds to me like if you're doing that, the best bet is to use a natural oil, a natural fat, like your skin food. And this is where I'm sorry, but this is what it sounds like. Or maybe just don't strip off your natural oils.
Soap's a good thing. We do get stinky from time to time, and every now and then, you get some motor oil on or
Oh yeah.
there comes time. I will say for your listener, if it doesn't say soap, definitely don't use it. You've got beauty bars and
Oh,
cleansing bars. Post World War II, again, we developed an absolutely toxic but highly effective disinfectant powder for wound care during World War II. And it did the trick, buddy. I mean, you got shot or stabbed, powder this stuff on there after the war. It's what are we going to do with all this stuff? And, call this a reasonably good thing the FDA did is they said, okay, you can use this stuff in bars, but you can't call it soap. So soap is short for the saponification process. That's taking lye and fat and saponify. You mix them at a certain temperature and then they solidify and turn into soap. And so it's just a low-hanging fruit for your listener. If it doesn't say soap on the package, do not use that. Okay. Then beyond that, again, it's the same issues. If it's fragrant, those are definitely synthetic chemicals. I would definitely, your soap shouldn't smell like anything. Now we have soap we're launching and we have an unscented and a scented version, but we're using essential oils. This is store-bought stuff. And yeah, I would definitely preferentially tell you want to use a soap that's made with, at the very least, plant-based fats, coconut oil, shea butter, avocado oil. Soap is a fat game as well. But beyond that, fragrances, all the other preservatives, they're just garbage. I do think having soap around is a good thing. You cut your hand or you cut your leg, it's good to be able to sanitize that area and then rub a little lard on it.
what happens to our skin I should reframe that. What can we expect to happen? I ran a little experiment at the beginning of the year using your face food and another natural I think, natural product.
It was a good product. I remember you did that.
Yeah, from Noble Body.
Yep.
And I couldn't tell any difference in my skin. I did it for 30 days. Right side of my face got Farrow Life, left side of my face got Noble Body. There was, however, the two products felt really different to me. I didn't know if I'm just too damn old for there to be for me to see any particular benefit, or if I wasn't using one right or using the other. But I was fascinated personally by the difference in just in the feel. Johnny at Noble Body, who's he's a friend now. I interviewed him several years ago for another podcast, suggests using a very small number of drops of his liquid stuff. So I did that.
Mm-hmm.
And it seemed like with the Farrow Life stuff, I couldn't use too little. It just seemed to have an almost infinite ability to keep spreading on my skin. Whereas the Noble Body stuff, after not very long, it felt like it absorbed into my skin.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't understand what's happening there. Does that make sense? Does the question make sense? I couldn't tell from a result standpoint that my skin reacted better to one or the other. But the Farrow Life stuff kind of, I mean, and I'm going to reveal some inside information here. When Charles was on the show for the first time 2 years ago, he sent me a small jar of the face food. And I still have it. I use so little of it. And I don't mean that I don't use it. I mean, it takes so little. It just keeps on going. What's happening?
Couple things. I want to make sure I heard you correctly. You could put more of my product on and it would soak in versus a little bit.
No,
I
could put very little of yours on, and it would seem to just take care of my whole face.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Okay.
Like I could do a fingernail clippings worth of face food, and it kept. Honest to God, it kind of felt magic. It was just weird. I couldn't understand what was going on. Whereas with Johnny's stuff, it behaved more like what I'd anticipated. Use a little bit, put it on, spread it around, and then you got to use a little bit more. And I'm not complaining. It was the behavior of them on my skin was so strange. I mean, so different with yours. Never had anything like it.
Yeah. I mean, we say a little goes a long way. I would say also to speak to just, you didn't see a difference, that the further you get in the skincare game, the further you get from buying your stuff at the store and utilizing more natural ingredients, I think the tighter the margins get in terms of performance. Right now, I will tell you, I think our stuff is way up toward the top of that list in terms of efficacy and fueling the skin. Not knowing the ingredients that are in his product, again, let's assume they're all natural and this, that, and the other. It was an oil though, right?
It was an oil, yeah.
Yeah. So
and a little dropper.
Yeah. And so I don't know what the oil is, but just by design, it's going to go on a little bit differently, and conceptually going to be a little bit different in terms of texture and spreadability. But I mean, that's the best answer I can give you in terms of the performance. Again, the more, us versus tallow, we use a little tallow in our products. They're both going to perform better, especially when you stack them up against aloe vera or Clinique or any of these other industrial oils. Everybody's skin is a little bit different. And, there is variance there. Your climate is a little bit different. A liquid oil might perform better in your level of humidity than, say, something more along the lines of a Farrow product. And so there is sort of baked in the cake variance with every individual and every climate. And I certainly don't expect our product to be the top dog in everywhere, but we certainly want to be in the top quartile in any environment on any strip of skin.
I could say without hesitance that it's the most, I'm hardly a skincare product expert, but I've tried a little here and there over the years, and it is by far Um, there's nothing like it. There's
You're
just
you're
absolutely nothing like it. It's
your right
crazy
side's
stuff.
your best side, Jack. I can see, you're on camera a lot, man. I know you sort of
Uh,
favor that right side. So
there is
you
nothing like it.
and you knew that going into the contest, which is why you wanted to protect that right side as much as
And
possible.
I mean, and I think again, the message here, similar to the message we've been trying to get out about your food, is, less processed, closer to
Yeah.
the source, clean. And, nature did a good job in providing what we need. And the whole concept that we needed to industrialize this and improve upon it, when the answer was right in front of us all along. And like you said, similar to the way we talk about, eat the foods that your grandparents and your great grandparents eat. Put the things on your skin that your grandparents and your great grandparents were. And that was the jar of lard, like you said, that they assuredly bought every week whenever they were going to the general store. I think that's kind of the message that we can give people. One other fun thing that I think came out during the talk, we should let people know about, the name Farrow, how that came about for your company, and kind of, I know there's a couple of meanings to that.
Yeah, sure. Farrow as a noun, and this is Farrow, not the PH. And then I think there's another F, Farrow. That's a grain, maybe Faro.
Mhm.
No, this Farrow as a noun refers to a newly born batch of piglets. Farrow as a verb, if you're farrowing, you are helping mama pig and daddy pig getting together and creating those babies. And, funny enough, we went through a branding exercise, I mean, Mudlark was a potential name. Farmer's Daughter was a potential. I remember these because we went through the brand, and Farrow was the last slide in the here are these brands. And I really liked Farmer's Daughter, candidly. But I have a farmer's daughter and I have a farmer's son. I was like, I can't do that to Scott. He's my head farmer. And so, yeah, we went with Farrow. We're a lard-based company, and part of the foundation of our company is really holding up this miraculous animal that, again, has fed us for years. We used to eat so much more pork. Again, due to, you could harvest a pig, a couple 100 pounds, and feed the village for a day or two, or feed the family for a week or two. What are you going to do with a 2,000 pound, 1,500 pound steer, when you don't have tractors and elevators and all these, or refrigeration? And yeah, that's the origin story of our brand. And we've got, Jack, you were asking about new products. It's not as new anymore. We launched our Epidermis
Yeah,
product.
I didn't get to talk to you about that.
Yeah, we launched it at this event last year. And it's done fairly well. It's a unique product. It comes in a tube. Our products are very heat sensitive. And so you take this tube and hold it in your hand for about 10 seconds, and you go open it up and it's liquid. So we've got some things we got to figure out. I put a warning label on there, but Epidermis has done very well. We've got a soap line that we are launching hopefully in the next 2 or 3 weeks. It's just
Yeah.
three different soaps. And I'm exploring a number of different products now. It's just,
I'm glad you brought up the soap because I
yeah.
wanted to ask you about it. It was unique in the soap industry, as far as I could tell. Do you mind
How
saying a
so?
little bit about it?
It's a goat's milk. We took our smart lard and we mixed it. It's a cold soap making process. We took our smart lard and mixed it with goat's milk, and it's called the goat soap. Goat as an acronym, greatest of all time. And we've got an unscented. We have a eucalyptus spearmint scent, which is probably my favorite. And then we have a cedarwood and wild orange scent. And
Is there a particular reason to use the goat's milk with it instead of, I don't know, whatever else is normally used?
milk has been used as a skin healing agent forever. When you make soap, you need a liquid, you need lye, and you need fat. And so, again, I've got someone that makes that soap for me. We just provide the smart lard. But I have made tons of soap. I use distilled water when I've tinkered
Oh,
with soaps in the past. But yeah, so the goat's milk by and large, replaces the water in a traditional saponification formula. And it's just very smooth. Milk is, again, milk and honey and olive oil have been tried and true skin treatments for millennia. And we get to call it the goat soap.
yeah. I mean, obviously, that's the main reason to do it. The thought strikes me that here we are. Phil and I, for the last 3 years, have been talking mostly about what you put in your body.
Mm-hmm.
And the message that we're hearing from one healthcare practitioner after another, one nutrition specialist after another, one researcher after another, is return to the old ways. Return to the old ways. If your great grandparents didn't put it in their body, don't put it in yours. And I'm hearing essentially the same thing from you. If they didn't put it on, if your great grandparents didn't put it on their body, don't put it on yours. It's just you don't have to comment. It's just it strikes me as kind of ironic that here we are, what, almost 200 years into the Industrial Revolution, and we're finding out that man, it was not an unmitigated advancement. There were a
Yeah,
lot of things folks were doing that we probably ought to go back to doing.
just so a couple things. It's actually worse than that, unfortunately, because your great grandparents ate bread, right? I mean,
Yeah.
I'm pretty carnivorous. I know Phil is. Our great grandparents ate bread. That was bread that they harvested the wheat themselves and cooked it themselves and used butter and
Yeah.
animal fats. That wheat doesn't exist anymore. I mean, you can go find some specialty wheats and, you see some of these sourdoughs, but, regrettably, we've really ruined a lot of traditional foods in the modern era. So and we've lost a respect for the sun. Skincare, people are scared of the sun these days, and they shouldn't. They should be embracing the sun. But, 100 years ago, if it was noon, there were 10 people maybe outside without any clothes on. And where were they? I don't know. People, had more respect for the sun. We got early sunshine because we were up early farming or whatever the case may be. So we were in constant contact with the sun, had copious levels of vitamin D. But when it got intense, we were either inside or fully covered. And two things sunscreen have done for us. They have convinced everyone that they were safe. And so you just put all this stuff on and go out at noon and spend all day in the sun. And then it's one of the most toxic skincare products we put on our skin. There's cleaner versions now, but there's still chemical laden goop. And so I tell people when I take my kids on the beach vacation, we get up early, we get all that early sunshine, and then 11:30 hits. If they want to stay out there, we put a hat on. We've got all this technical gear now, really light water wicking gear. So we cover up. And of course, I lather them up in a little lard too. But otherwise, we go inside, we eat lunch, we play a board game. We have a little bit more respect for the sun. And I think that's another big issue today.
This feels deep. This feels like philosophy. We've been
Well,
Yeah.
I think there's a little bit of all of it in it. And, I think it's just amazing what Charles is doing and really, encourage people to go check it out. And we'll give the information in a minute how to do that. And it will certainly be in the show notes. But ultimately, what Charles is doing, I really respect it. It is truly a family business. You get on his social media, you're going to see the kids participating, and he's doing things the way that I think they should be done. And we talk about it with our food, and I think now we also need to talk about it with our skincare. And it really just, we should all be examining all of the areas of our life and thinking about how it's been hijacked from us and how we need to be more intentional about really a lot of these decisions that we're making in life. And I think ultimately that's what our health message comes down to. And I think what Charles is doing can be a big part of that. So with that being said, let the people know how they can get the good stuff from you, Charles.
You're too kind. There's a couple ways I'm going to brag because this is one of my little merit badges. If you join Dr. Ovadia's private practice, you get a free total skincare bundle with me because we're the preferred skincare provider for Ovadia Heart Health. Our website's the easiest way to find us, farrow.life. Again, that's FAROW.life. Coupon code is stay off. Just stay off my operating table. Will save you 15%. And you can find us on Instagram at Farrow Skin. Those are probably the two best spots to find us. But yeah, send me a note. If you contact us through the website, you're looking at the guy that reads them and responds to them. We're still small but growing. And it's just a real honor, Phil and Jack. I appreciate everything certainly you've done to promote our brand and help me spread the lard. And I try to return the favor. I think it's incredible what you're doing, Phil. And, it's the average consumer and the average doctor look a lot alike as the average consumer and your average dermatologist. We're really trying to unscrew a lot of people's brains, whether it be food or skincare. And so I certainly, I'm certainly grateful to join arms with you guys and continue to give people options to stay.
I'd like to point
healthy.
out, Charles is not a sponsor for this show. We don't take any sponsorship money on this show.
No.
I just like the product. I love to tell people about it. Yeah.
It's fun.
Y'all check it out. It's fun and it's cool. And it's very consistent with this whole philosophy of if your great grandparents didn't use it, you shouldn't use it either. Looks like Phil might have oh, nope. Good. He's still with us. I was afraid you got called away to do emergency surgery there.
And Phil, we can tell your listener now to book a ticket to Tampa, Florida for next November, I think, fall. Hack Your Health is coming to your backyard. I'm very excited about that. So
yeah, be on the lookout for Hack Your Health 2025. Certainly, Charles and I will both be there so you can get the early calendar set.
All right. That's it for the day. I think Charles will definitely be back. I really, truly can't. I think, folks, by the time this one drops, hopefully the goat soap will be out. I'm going to get some for myself just because, I don't know, I just like the idea. All right. For Charles Mayfield of Farrow Life, the Lard works in mysterious ways. Dr. Philip Ovadia, this has been the Stay Off My Operating Table podcast. Thanks for joining us. We'll talk to y'all next time.
Chances are you wouldn't be listening to this podcast if you didn't need to change your life and get healthier. So take action right now. Book a call with Dr. Ovadia's team. One small step in the right direction is all it takes to get started. Contact us at ifixhearts.com/talk. That's ifixhearts.com/talk.